Hey guys! Tonight we're slipping on our sandals and wandering through the dimly lit streets of ancient Thebes. Picture it. Soft sandals scuffing along dusty alleyways, low lanterns flickering against mud brick walls, and the air heavy with the scent of roasted garlic, wine-soaked dates, and something floral you can't quite place. You pass a linen merchant shutting up his stall, hear a priest chanting to himself in the distance, and finally arrive at your destination, an open-air night market tucked behind a temple. Here, the world slows down. Incense coils lazily in the warm night air. A sleepy cat grooms itself beside a crate of lotus bulbs. Somewhere nearby, someone's grinding cinnamon bark with a rhythmic, sleepy thunk. This is your gateway to the story of one of the most curiously cozy customs in Egyptian history, those bizarre, fragrant cones people used to wear on their heads. Yes, really, on their heads, melting slowly, like scented ice cream in a desert. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're watching this in bed, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean against a faded pillar near the market's edge and breathe in. The mix is overwhelming but somehow relaxing. Lotus flower, frankincense, a hint of myrrh, maybe even freshly baked barley cakes. It's the smell of civilization, of sacred rituals, and yes, personal hygiene, sort of. In ancient Egypt, scent wasn't just for pleasure, it was for survival. You think sweating in modern summer is bad? Try wearing layers of linen under a 100-degree sun with no deodorant, no showers, and no air conditioning. Smelling good wasn't optional, it was social survival. That's why, around 1550 BCE, people started smearing, burning, bathing, and, most memorably, wearing their perfume, as in plopping a lump of scented animal fat and resin on their freshly shaved heads and letting it slowly melt down over their body heat. This, dear listener, is your gentle entry into the world of perfumed cones. Imagine, you're a middle-class scribe invited to a party hosted by a high priest. You're nervous, you've borrowed a clean kilt, scrubbed your feet, and even practiced your flute playing in case there's entertainment. But there's one thing you absolutely can't forget: the cone. Perfume cones, also known as unguent cones, were considered the finishing touch. No one quite agrees on who invented them. Some say they date back even earlier than we've found. But by the time of the New Kingdom, they're the accessory du jour. Historians still argue whether these cones were common among all classes or reserved for the wealthy. Archaeologists used to think they were just symbolic, seen only in art, never in actual graves. Then, in 2019, 2 real fossilized cones were found attached to human skulls. So, it turns out, yes, they were very real, very waxy, and very necessary. You glance around the market again. That stall over there? It sells nothing but oils. Almond, castor, moringa, used to dilute perfume or apply to the skin on dry days. The woman grinding bark? She's likely preparing kai-fi, a sacred incense made from as many as 16 ingredients. There's even a vendor quietly boiling down pine resin behind a screen, stirring it into honey and animal fat. Everything here is about scent. The smells mask the sweat, sure, but they also signal who you are. If you smell like blue lotus, you're wealthy. If you smell like beer and goat, well, people might talk. There's a cheeky scribe joke scratched on a wall somewhere that says, "He who does not stink of lotus must be poor or ill." Harsh, but probably true. You tug your robe tighter. A priest walks past in a head cone already halfway melted, oily trails running down his neck. His face is serene, maybe a little too serene. You wonder how sticky his collar is. Still, he smells divine. This is your life tonight. You're immersed in a culture that sees smell as a status symbol, a spiritual cleanser, and a form of communication all at once. Smell was woven into identity the way you might wear cologne, carry an iPhone, or drive a Tesla. Only here, it melts. As you ease back against the wall and listen to the market wind down, you notice something else. The people here aren't rushing. They're preparing for the sacred rhythm of sleep. Perfumed oils are applied not just for parties, but for dreams. The lotus, in particular, was believed to have trance-like properties. Some even claim it was mildly narcotic. A little blue lotus behind the ears might help you drift off with visions of the Nile. You close your eyes and take another deep breath. Somewhere in the distance, a temple gong sounds. The last light fades behind the pylons. The smell of the city lingers, thick, complex, a touch overwhelming, but oddly comforting. Kind of like the smell of old books or the first spring rain. It's strange. You came here to learn about some silly wax cones, but already they're starting to make sense. They're not just weird hats. They're the soul of an entire civilization, melting slowly, scenting everything, vanishing by morning. The market quiets. Crickets begin their slow, chirping serenade in the palm shadows, and somewhere close by, a dog coughs in its sleep. You stretch your legs, brush a bit of sand off your knee, and start walking again, past the sleeping merchants, through a narrow alley, and toward the more polished part of the city. Tonight, you're attending a feast. And at this feast, every guest will be perfumed. It's not just a party, it's a performance. You smell like what you want to project: status, divinity, seduction, or just basic decency. And let's be honest, given the heat, close quarters, and the Egyptians' impressive ability to sweat through multiple layers of linen, smelling decent is already a miracle. You duck beneath a stone archway, passing murals etched into the walls. Many of them depict people in festive scenes, dancing, feasting, playing lutes, and yes, almost every single person is wearing one of those little waxy cones right on their heads. It's a fashion statement you can't unsee once you've spotted it. It's like a scented Hershey's Kiss slowly dripping down the back of your neck. The cones were usually made from a base of animal fat or beeswax, mixed with precious oils and crushed petals. Most popular? Blue lotus, of course, but also frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and even exotic imports like cedar oil from Lebanon. You wore your wealth on your head, quite literally. Some scholars argue about whether these cones were actually used in everyday life or just represented ideals in artwork. But remember those 2019 skulls? The cones found were real, waxy, and carefully placed. So yes, the Egyptians wore them, and quite possibly they slept in them too. Now imagine arriving at a noble's estate, the torchlight flickering off alabaster pillars, and a young servant greeting you with, what else? A perfumed cone. Not a drink, not a handshake. A hunk of scented wax, ready to soften into your scalp over the next hour. You hold it like a tiny offering. It's warm from being carried. As the servant presses it into place atop your freshly shaved head, the scent hits you, deep and floral with something citrusy underneath. It smells like your memories of river breezes, temple incense, and the honey-sweet oil your mother used to rub into your shoulders when you were sick. And now it's oozing right into your eyebrow. No one said elegance was comfortable. The idea was that the wax would gradually melt with your body heat, releasing perfume over time, kind of like a human Glade plug-in. The result? A continuous, gentle scent cloud surrounding your personal space. Ideal for a cramped feast room packed with dancers, singers, and more than one overripe nobleman. You find your place at the low banquet table. The musician begins tuning a lyre. Servants weave between guests, ladling beer and placing bowls of dates and honey-roasted duck. Your cone is already beginning to tilt slightly to the left, and someone across the table smirks at you. This is where the debate gets heated. Well, as heated as sleepy archaeology debates can be. Some scholars think the cones weren't just about smelling good. They may have had religious or magical significance. After all, many of the ingredients, like frankincense and myrrh, were sacred offerings. Blue lotus, too, was often associated with the sun god Ra and rebirth. Historians still argue whether the cones were considered offerings to the gods, wearable spells, or just glorified deodorant. Could be all three. The Egyptians weren't big on separating the sacred from the mundane. Smelling good might have been a form of prayer. And then there's the odd stuff, like that one ancient love poem where a girl tells her lover she'll sneak into his house, make him smell of kai-fi, and then, play her lute for him. You fill in the gaps. Fringe theory alert. There's a small camp of Egyptophiles who believe the cones had hallucinogenic properties, especially those made from certain types of lotus and resins. Were these fragrant hats also mood enhancers, dream inducers, ancient party drugs? There's no proof, but there's no disproof either. It's Egypt. Things are allowed to be mysterious. You lean back against a cushion as the musicians begin a slow, rhythmic song. The cones are in full effect now. The air smells intoxicating. Your own cone has begun its downward migration. Your ear tingles as a waxy droplet traces a line along your cheek. Someone across from you, possibly a minor priestess, giggles as her cone slips sideways like a sleepy crown. She doesn't fix it. That's part of the vibe now. Drip, don't stress. You sip your date wine, slightly too sweet, and pick at a honeyed fig. The scent in the room has shifted, stronger now, as the temperature rises. The smell of blue lotus thickens. It's sweet, heady, a little like vanilla but richer, darker. It's also slightly bitter, like oversteeped tea. And then, in the hazy cloud of it all, you notice something else. Calm. The cones have slowed everything down. People speak softer. Laughter is mellow, conversations unhurried. No one's in a rush. No one smells bad. For a moment, the entire room is a bubble of stillness, scented with wax and oil and flowers that bloomed 1,000 years ago. You feel yourself sink into the cushion a little deeper. Perfume cones may seem silly, but tonight, in the glow of torches and the quiet flicker of laughter, they feel like a genius invention. Practical, spiritual, a little indulgent, a little messy, but unmistakably Egyptian. And hey, better than Axe body spray. Someone claps twice, soft, deliberate, and the music shifts. The rhythm picks up. Dancers emerge from behind linen curtains, bodies painted with henna, ankles jingling with gold. Their movements are smooth and precise, like flowing water. And still, the perfume cones drip. Your own cone is now officially a forehead hazard. You swipe gently at your temple and smear a glossy trail of blue lotus oil along your brow. Not exactly the glamour you'd imagined, but hey, there's something charming about shared discomfort, especially when everyone in the room is melting together, one fragrant drip at a time. Now, here's a fun side note. The Egyptians didn't just wear perfume cones at feasts. They wore them at funerals. Yep, same headwear, vastly different vibe. Let's rewind a little. Imagine standing beneath a stone colonnade. The sun is high, the air dry. Before you, a richly adorned mummy lies atop a funeral bier, its face painted gold. Around it, mourners wail and chant, and there you are, dressed in your finest linen, freshly oiled, with a waxy perfume cone perched solemnly on your head. Why? Because scent was sacred. In life, perfume pleased the gods. In death, it honored the transition. Fragrances like frankincense, cinnamon, and myrrh weren't just air fresheners. They were tools to purify the soul, to guide it safely from one world into the next. A cone melting in the desert heat was more than decoration. It was a divine passport, a fragrant exhale toward the afterlife. And historians still argue whether those cones were seen as offerings to Anubis and Osiris or as protective charms against evil spirits lingering near the tombs. Maybe both. The Egyptians didn't do things halfway. But here's the kicker. Archaeologists found remnants of these perfume cones buried with the dead, placed near the head or wrapped among linen layers. They weren't just for show. These waxy accessories made it all the way into eternity, likely still releasing scent in the darkness of a sealed tomb long after the mourners had gone home. You step away from the memory of the funeral and back into the feast. The dancers spin, their cones miraculously holding firm. Someone next to you murmurs a joke about it being a performance under pressure, and you chuckle because, really, it is. The cones have turned every guest into a low-key wax sculpture. At your elbow, a servant leans in with a tray of papyrus fans. Not to cool you. No, that would be too practical. These fans are soaked in essential oils. You're meant to wave them gently near your face, mixing their scent with your own melting cone, creating a custom blend of fragrance based on your personal preferences, dinner choices, and I guess, emotional state? Tonight, you're rocking lotus, cinnamon, and maybe a hint of grilled goat. Here's the thing. Egyptians didn't have deodorant as we know it, but they absolutely obsessed over hygiene. They bathed frequently, shaved everything, and used a mix of scented pastes to keep the armpit situation under control. Some of these pastes were made with natron, basically natural baking soda, mixed with fragrant oils, honey, and ground herbs. And while perfume cones were showy, the day-to-day citizen often used simpler scent methods. Little wax balls tucked into wigs, or pouches of herbs worn like jewelry. It was like walking around with a personal aromatherapy kit. Fringe tidbit? Some ancient medical texts even recommend perfumed treatments for less than fragrant body issues. Let's just say the phrase Blue Lotus suppository appears more than once. Historians still debate whether these treatments were effective or just wishful sniffing. But the underlying truth holds. Scent, to the Egyptians, was a reflection of spiritual purity. To smell good was to be good. The music slows again. A singer with a voice like velvet stands, harp in hand, and begins a song about lovers meeting at night beneath the lotus flowers. You glance around the room. Nearly every guest has reached the glossy stage of cone meltdown. Foreheads shine, hair gleams. Even the floor near the dancers bears slick trails of wax. And yet, no one complains. There's a quiet dignity in surrendering to it. Maybe that's the secret. The perfume cone is less about masking odor and more about leaning into the moment. Accepting that life is messy, fragrant, and constantly melting. Just like the wax. You close your eyes briefly, letting the layers of scent settle around you. Behind the perfume, there's roasted meat, dry papyrus, the dusty undertone of aged stone, and somewhere, faintly, the mineral tang of the river. You're fully immersed in an olfactory portrait of the past. And here comes a quirky twist. We've discovered scent recipes from ancient Egyptian tablets, actual formulas for creating the perfect cone. Some are surprisingly complex. One calls for heating 17 ingredients in a precise sequence, including calamus, juniper, pine resin, and wine, like an ancient perfume chef. In fact, temples often had dedicated perfumers. Their job wasn't just to make things smell nice, it was to distill the sacred. These blends were offered to gods daily, wafted over altars, and worn by priests during rituals. To wear scent was to be in tune with the divine. And now, sitting here, cone half-dripped, stomach full, eyelids heavy, you start to understand it. The scent anchors you. It softens the edges of the night. It holds you still in time. Perfume cones weren't just accessories. They were invitations. To belong, to celebrate, to mourn, to dream. You yawn slightly, blame it on the wine, and lean back again. The music continues. The cones drip. And tomorrow, someone will scrape the wax from the floor, heat it back up, and make a new cone for someone else. Because scent, in Egypt, never really dies. You wake, or rather, drift, into the next part of the evening with the soft, rhythmic tapping of sandals on polished stone. The dancers have retreated, and now scribes enter with their scrolls. Yes, even at parties, ancient Egyptians found a way to sneak in paperwork. But don't worry, tonight's scrolls aren't for taxes or grain counts. They're poetry. Love poems, mostly. Some so tender you feel your perfume cone wobble in appreciation. One scribe clears his throat and begins a verse about meeting his beloved under the moonlight. She smelled, he declares, like a garden after the rain, like lotus and myrrh warmed in sunlight. The crowd exhales in unison, a soft sigh of envy. You lean into the words, the metaphors, the idea that scent could describe a person's very soul. And now you're thinking, how did they make these cones anyway? Because surely someone in the back room isn't just throwing flowers into wax and hoping for the best. Picture a dark, incense-filled chamber tucked behind a temple courtyard. Clay pots line the shelves, each labeled with delicate hieroglyphs: cinnamon bark, myrrh, balanos oil, crushed lily petals. A perfumer, possibly a woman. Yes, women could hold this role, stands before a heated copper vessel. She's got beeswax melting slowly and a small mortar for grinding spices. Fragrant oils are added at exact temperatures to preserve their essence. Some blends take hours, some days. Timing is everything. If you add blue lotus too early, the scent burns off. Too late, and it doesn't bind to the wax. This is chemistry, spirituality, and maybe a dash of sorcery rolled into one steaming vat. And historians still debate whether the exact recipes were passed down generationally or guarded as temple secrets. One papyrus mentions a scent of seduction, reserved for queens alone, while another lists the blend that pleases all gods. So basically, perfume cones were somewhere between cologne and cosmic diplomacy. Let's sprinkle in a quirky detail. Some recipes used crocodile fat. That's right. In a land where the Nile teemed with reptilian danger, someone had the bright idea to skim fat off a crocodile and blend it with lavender and rose. Presumably, this combo was considered both brave and irresistible. You imagine someone bragging, "Yes, I smell like victory and swamp beast." But hey, they were onto something. Crocodile fat has staying power. The Egyptians loved scents that lasted all day, or longer. A cone made with that sort of base wouldn't just perfume a room, it would haunt it for weeks. Back in the feast, the scribes finish their recital and retreat, leaving a soft hum in their wake. Now a new wave of servants moves through the room, bearing bowls of scented water. You dip your fingertips in one. It's warm, infused with cardamom and mint. You press it to your neck and feel an almost electric tingle. And here's the thing. Bathing wasn't just functional for Egyptians, it was ritualistic. They didn't merely clean their bodies, they purified their spirits. Temples had bathhouses where priests bathed up to 4 times a day. And yes, scented cones were worn even afterward, as a kind of aromatic punctuation mark. But even regular folk understood the power of smell. A well-scented person could be seen as lucky, noble, maybe even touched by the gods. A stinky one? Possibly cursed. There's a particularly spicy ancient love letter that reads, "I waited for you at the door, but you came smelling of onions and sweat. You have shamed the gods and lost my heart." Ouch! So yes, aromatic hygiene was very serious business, which brings us to another odd little tidbit. Egyptians sometimes trained monkeys to help with their perfumes. Stick with me here. In wealthier homes, trained macaques were used to gather blossoms from delicate trees, like frankincense or myrrh. Why? Because their nimble fingers and light frames wouldn't damage the branches. Some tomb paintings even show monkeys offering petals to their owners, like fluffy, fragrant courtiers. And no, I cannot confirm whether the monkeys wore cones, but part of me really hopes so. You glance across the feast again. Candles have been replaced with oil lamps. The glow is deeper now, almost syrupy, and the scent, it's evolved. Where earlier it was sharp and floral, now it's darker, richer. The cones have melted past the blossom stage into pure resin and spice. You catch a waft of cassia, maybe labdanum. It's less garden now, more temple. It's subtle, but noticeable. This was by design. The cones were layered to release different notes over time, just like modern perfumes. A top note to make an entrance, a middle note to charm, a bass note to linger, like memory. And historians still argue whether these stages symbolized the life cycle: youth, love, death. It would fit the Egyptian mindset. Everything was cyclical, even scent. Someone offers you a pomegranate. You take it. The juice is sticky, sweet, and tart. As it drips down your fingers, you realize it mirrors the cone, lush, decadent, a bit impractical. That was the point. The Egyptians didn't avoid mess. They celebrated it. Passion, scent, texture, drips. Life wasn't tidy. Why should your forehead be? A woman near you fans herself with a lotus-etched fan. She's smiling, eyes half-lidded, cone half-melted, lips stained with wine. Her scent wafts your way, cinnamon and cedar. You nod. She nods. This is the only kind of conversation you need tonight. And just like that, you feel yourself settle deeper into the cushions. The music begins again, slower this time. Deeper drums, lower harps, the kind of melody that makes your pulse slow and your thoughts blur around the edges. You're not in the 21st century anymore. You're here, in the soft heat, with a melting crown and 1,000 years of scent wrapped around your skin. The music continues, slipping lower in pitch like it's been swaddled in velvet. You're no longer listening with your ears. You're hearing it in your bones, like when the bass in a song presses against your ribs. That's how you know the night has turned sacred. This isn't just a feast anymore. This is a spell. Somewhere in the haze, a priestess appears. Not announced, not grand, just there. Her movements are slow, deliberate, like she's walking through water. And atop her head? Yes, another perfume cone. Only this one is larger, darker, more resinous than the ones worn by dancers or nobles. This cone means business. She stops in front of a small altar tucked behind the banquet, and as she kneels, the room stills. A servant brings her a flame. She lights something at the base of the altar, a bundle of bundled reeds and resins, and suddenly, the scent changes again. Frankincense. Real, thick, holy. The kind of smell that makes you straighten your spine even while your eyelids start to sag. It hits you. This isn't just a party. It's a ritual. Ancient Egypt didn't divide the sacred from the social the way we do. Gods didn't live in temples and stay there. They showed up at weddings, at harvests, in birth chambers, and, yes, even at dinner. Especially if there were perfume cones involved. See, the scent wasn't just for humans. It was for the divine. The idea was simple. Gods, like humans, responded to smell. So if you wanted a god to listen, you didn't just pray. You perfumed the air. You turned your forehead into an offering. The cone was both cosmetic and communication. It whispered to Hathor, goddess of music and love. It courted Bastet, the feline goddess of pleasure and protection. And if you were clever, you added a dash of sycamore essence, because legend said that's where the sun god Ra liked to nap. And here's a curious fringe theory. Some believe the exact placement of the cone, right at the hairline, was meant to mimic the uraeus, that royal serpent worn on pharaohs' crowns. Only this was a softer crown, a fragrant one, a reminder that even commoners could wear something powerful. Historians still argue whether this interpretation is valid or just the wishful thinking of romantic Egyptologists, but hey, the image works. Meanwhile, the priestess rises, and the scent of her cone thickens the air. Not floral anymore, earthy, smoky. The kind of smell that sticks to your clothes and maybe even your dreams. You close your eyes and breathe in, and for a second, you're not even sure you exist outside this moment. Someone clinks a cup nearby, but even that sound is muffled, like you're under warm water. Let's pause for a fun tidbit. Did you know that some temples kept scent libraries? That's right. Scrolls describing scent blends stored like recipes in a cookbook, each associated with a ritual or a deity. Blend for pleasing Osiris. Incense for childbirth. Ointment for forgiving betrayal. And one of the most powerful? A blend called Kai-Fi. You may have heard the name. Kai-Fi wasn't a cone exactly. It was more of a pellet, a tightly packed incense ball made from up to 16 ingredients. Myrrh, honey, wine, juniper, raisins, and more. It took days to make, sometimes weeks, and it was only burned at night. Why? Because the Egyptians believed Kai-Fi helped dreams open like lotus flowers. It soothed the dead and softened the gods. Imagine falling asleep to that aroma curling through your chamber, like the divine tucking you in. The use of Kai-Fi was so revered that even the Greeks wrote about it centuries later. And some modern perfumers still try to recreate it, though with far fewer raisins. Back at the feast, the priestess turns, her cone visibly smaller now. She walks past you and your nostrils do a little pirouette involuntarily. You catch galbanum, maybe? It's sharp, green, almost piney, like a forest waking up inside a temple. You sit a little straighter. The cone on your head is slowly trailing wax down your braid, and now you're starting to see it not just as decoration, but as a countdown. When it melts fully, the evening is over, like a candle measuring joy. Which brings us to another delightfully strange use for these cones: timing devices. No joke. Some believe the Egyptians used the melting rate to estimate the length of an event, a courtship song, a prayer, a punishment. Picture it. You'll scrub the temple floor until your cone finishes melting. I mean, poetic justice. And again, this is debated. Some archaeologists think cones melted too slowly to be reliable timers. Others say they were too variable. Heat, humidity, cone thickness, all changed the rate. But the theory lingers, scent and time braided together. You can't help but wonder what modern rituals could benefit from that logic. First date? 1 cone. Family reunion? Better make it 2. You stretch a little, realizing the wax on your own cone is starting to pool at the edge of your scarf. Someone offers you a scented cloth to dab it. It smells like coriander and crushed mint, sharp, spicy, with just a hint of citrus. Fresh, but not too fresh. Egyptian fresh. And now that you're halfway through the night, you start to notice something else. Your mood has changed. At the start, everything was bright, fast, floral, but now, it's mellow, heady, almost intoxicating. Like your thoughts are being gently stirred. That was the point. The cones weren't just about smelling good. They were emotional anchors. Each stage of scent triggered a shift. Excitement, seduction, surrender, stillness. The Egyptians weren't just perfuming their skin. They were guiding their night. It's easy to forget, in a world of commercial colognes and plug-in air fresheners, that scent used to be sacred, personalized, crafted with intention, a note for every mood, a formula for every feeling. And tonight, you're wearing history itself. As the priestess exits and the music rises again, Flutes now, soft and lilting. You feel yourself drifting, not just from the wine, not just from the warmth, but from the very idea of now. Your cone melts on, your breath slows, and still the story deepens. You lean back a little now, the edge of a cool limestone pillar pressing gently against your shoulder blades. It's strangely grounding. The music wafts over you like steam. The scents shift again. More subtle now, darker. Fewer flowers, more bark, sap, and resin. The kind of smells that make you think of old wood and smoke, or dreams you almost remember. Across the room, a nobleman stands up. He's older, lined face, silver at the temples, but dressed in linen so fine it practically floats. He gestures, and two attendants bring forward something odd. A stack of wax cones, larger than the others, painted with tiny blue stripes. This isn't decoration, it's demonstration. He's going to explain the cones. Well, not explain with words, more like perform, because in Egypt even science wore a costume. He places a cone into the hands of one attendant and another onto a small carved stand that looks suspiciously like a head. The attendant walks slowly, turning side to side, letting everyone see the cone up close. You lean in. It's glossy, almost glassy, with a faint shimmer. Probably beeswax mixed with fat and something silvery? Is that ground shell? Mica? The nobleman lifts a reed stylus like a conductor's baton and taps it lightly on the side of the stand. A signal. One of the household slaves steps forward with a torch and lights a small flame beneath the cone, not to burn it, but just enough to soften it. Within seconds, the wax begins to melt, slow, deliberate, rhythmic. The cone gives up its scent like a secret. First cedar, then something spicy. Cinnamon? Not local, imported. And just like that, you're reminded, the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with trade, especially for smell. Frankincense from Punt, myrrh from Somalia, cedarwood from Lebanon, cinnamon from far-off India, even if they didn't know the name India yet. If it smelled interesting, Egypt wanted it. There's even a theory, though historians still argue over this, that the early perfume cones were born from these trade experiments. Imported resin that didn't quite work as incense? Melt it with oil, shape it into a cone, slap it on your head. Problem solved. Some say the cones were a way to test the limits of scent. Others think they were part of diplomatic gift exchanges. Imagine a pharaoh receiving a cone with a note. From the forests of the east. Rub this on your dancers and tell us what the gods say. And here's a fun little fringe fact to chew on while your own cone drips quietly down your scalp. Some experimental archaeologists have tried to recreate perfume cones using ancient recipes. Most of them fail. Either the wax gets too soft and runs down the neck in 10 minutes, or it hardens so much it becomes a scented helmet. One group in France even discovered their recreation was so sticky that it accidentally glued itself to the scalp. Hair had to be cut. Tears were shed. History is not for the weak. But back in this ancient room, none of those troubles exist. Everything is graceful, practiced, choreographed. This nobleman isn't showing you how a cone melts. He's showing you how time melts. Because in a weird, gentle way, perfume cones weren't just about now. They were memory. Egyptians believed scent was tied to the soul, that it lingered on objects, on tomb walls, in the folds of clothing, that a smell could call back a person's spirit long after the body was gone. It's why mummies were packed with spices, why tombs were painted with images of scented oils, why cone-shaped residues have been found in burial chambers. You start to wonder, what would your own soul smell like? Not your favorite perfume. The real scent of you. If someone tried to bring you back with a cone, what would they mix? Lemon? Books? Old leaves in autumn? There's a scholar, yes, a real one, who once proposed that every household in Egypt had its own scent signature, passed down like a recipe. Grandmother's myrrh blend, father's favorite lotus tincture, child's first oil bath, a family's history in scent, not words. Historians still debate whether this is based on fact or poetic imagination, but it's a theory that makes your heart ache a little, in the best way. The nobleman steps aside now, and the attendant carefully collects the half-melted cone. He holds it up like a goblet of gold. The cone isn't trash. It's precious even in pieces. Sometimes the leftover wax was collected, re-scented, and re-molded for another day. Nothing wasted. The Egyptians weren't minimalist exactly, but they believed in layering, meaning reuse. A cone wasn't just a product, it was a process. Wax melted into hair, then gathered into cloth, then washed into jars. The scent living on long after the night ended. You tilt your head slightly and feel a warm droplet slide just behind your ear. It's not unpleasant. In fact, it feels earned, like you've joined something older than yourself. A few servants now appear with small linen cloths dipped in rose water. They dab at guests' foreheads, catching stray drips from cones before they reach the eyes. This was another element of cone wearing that gets glossed over. It required grace under pressure. Nobody wants cinnamon oil in their corneas. Trust the Egyptians to turn a cosmetic risk into a cultural art form. As the rose water evaporates against your skin, you glance down at your hands. They're faintly scented, too, from resting in your lap, from touching the cloth. You're becoming perfumed from the inside out. And then, you hear it. A whisper. Not from a guest, not from the musicians. It's the cone itself. Not literal words, obviously. You haven't gone full Pharaoh Moses. But the scent is speaking to something deep, like it's waking up a memory you didn't know you had. Maybe that's what the cones were all along. Not decoration, not deodorant, just memory prompts. You close your eyes, picture a garden, bright green papyrus, a tree bending under figs, the Nile breathing quietly nearby, and someone you loved once, not clearly, just a shadow, walking toward you, holding a bundle of myrrh. They smile. You remember. Just for a second. Then it's gone. You open your eyes. The nobleman bows. The cones are collected. The music shifts again, harps now. And in the warmth of the scented air, you begin to float a little further away from wakefulness. The night isn't over. Not yet. But it's curling inward, like incense smoke rising and folding back into itself. Your body is starting to soften at the edges, like papyrus soaking gently in water. You stretch your legs beneath the linen robe, shifting just enough to feel the fabric tug slightly at your knees. The air is thicker now, drowsier. You've been breathing perfume for hours, and it's doing something to your brain, untying knots, blurring the corners of time. The nobleman has returned to his place. But now another figure steps forward. She's slender, elegant, wrapped in linen so thin it whispers with each movement. On her head, another cone, but different. This one is darker, almost black, with a slight reddish sheen like dried blood or crushed berries. She carries herself like someone used to being watched. She probably is. This is one of the palace perfumers. Not a servant, not a noble, a craftswoman, maybe even a priestess. Because in ancient Egypt, those who handled scent weren't just making people smell good. They were mediating between the world of the living and something stranger. She carries a tray of raw ingredients. You smell them before you see them. One bowl holds crushed rose petals, already browning at the edges. Another glistens with honey. There's a chunk of something tarry and black, probably labdanum, sticky and intense, scraped from the leaves of wild shrubs in the desert. She starts mixing them. No fire, just slow pressure, pressing petals into paste with a carved stone roller. then adding the sticky resin. A drop of oil. Maybe two. The tray is passed around. You're invited to touch. So you do. Carefully. The mixture is warm, gritty, alive with smell. It's not perfume yet. It's memory in pre-production. You run your finger along the edge of the bowl, and for a moment, you're a little Egyptian apprentice in a hot courtyard, working under the watchful eye of your teacher. Your nose burns. Your fingertips shine. There's something romantic about how hands-on it all is. No tubes, no vials, no pipettes or lab coats, just raw nature and trial and error. And guess what? Historians still argue whether Egyptians had any concept of perfume the way we do now. The word itself didn't exist in their language. What they had was kai-fi, a blend of up to 16 ingredients, burned or worn or offered to the gods. But even kai-fi wasn't consistent. Recipes varied wildly. Some included raisins, others threw in wine. There's one papyrus that even mentions goose fat. Yes, goose fat. For fragrance. Your pillow suddenly feels a little less cozy. But that's what made it magic. Improvisation. There's a theory that perfume cones evolved out of kai-fi experimentation. Maybe a batch didn't burn well, so someone molded it, placed it on a head, and waited. The warmth of the body melted it just enough to activate the scent. A walking sensor. A breathing altar. And here's your fringe detail for the night. Some cones may have contained psychoactive ingredients. Don't worry, you're not about to hallucinate Cleopatra on a giraffe. But certain resins, like myrrh and opopanax, have mild mood-altering effects when warmed and inhaled. They relax the muscles, slow the heart, induce calm. So maybe wearing a cone wasn't just about smelling nice. Maybe it was about slipping into a slightly altered state, ideal for rituals, ceremonies, or long philosophical conversations about crocodile gods. The perfumer finishes blending the paste and begins forming a new cone. Her fingers are fast but gentle, sculpting the wax with the same care you might give to folding a letter you're never going to send. She places it onto a new guest's head, an older man with bright eyes and a thick bracelet of gold around his wrist. He doesn't move, but you see the change immediately. His shoulders ease, his breathing slows. The scent rises around him like a fog, and for a moment, he seems farther away, peaceful, like he's standing at the edge of a memory only he can see. That's the thing about scent. It doesn't ask permission. It slips past the rational mind and whispers directly into your primitive lizard brain. You've been here before. You felt this before. You inhale deeply. Something woody, something sweet, and something a little strange. Was that blue lotus? Egyptians believed blue lotus had divine properties. They used it in wine, in perfumes, in sex rituals, and yes, even in cones. Some researchers think it had mild narcotic effects, a calming high, euphoric but gentle, like slipping into warm water and never needing to come up for air. You wonder if tonight's cone has a bit of that flower inside it. Your thoughts are starting to slow. Not dull, just suspended. Like they're floating above you, waiting for you to catch up. The perfumer bows. The tray is passed again, this time with cones not yet hardened. You're invited to smell each blend. One smells of mint and something lemony, maybe balm. Another is darker, with a base of burned resin. They're not categorized by gender or rank or season. They're personalized. There's even one that smells like cake. You lift it just to be sure. Yep, honey, almonds, dates. Someone made a dessert cone. You smile. Ancient people had jokes, too. The candlelight is starting to fade now, or maybe your eyes are simply adjusting, slipping into the rhythm of the night. One by one, guests are relaxing into silence. Nobody speaks, not because it's forbidden, but because scent has done the talking for hours. Your own cone is almost gone. You feel it, a slight tug as it loosens from your hair, as if the wax is saying goodbye. You leave it there, resting on your head like a crown, even as it shrinks. You're part of this ritual now. You lean back, your neck softens. You feel the weight of centuries pressing down, not in a heavy way, but like a blanket made of time. These cones, these scents, these ancient perfumers, they were trying to tell the world something. That memory isn't stored in scrolls or stone, it's in the body, in breath, in the way something smells just before you fall asleep. You wake up. Well, sort of. You weren't fully asleep, just folded into the edge of a dream. The kind where you're still aware of the room around you, but it's all filtered through thick gauze. The scent cone has melted further, and you can feel a slight stickiness in your hairline. Not unpleasant, just ceremonial. You imagine this is how anointed kings must have felt, if they ever got to lie down without someone fanning them or asking for grain taxes. Beside you, a small scribe appears, young, serious. He's holding a narrow scroll and a fine-tipped reed pen. Not writing, though. He's watching. You realize he's here to document the cones. Apparently, not all perfumed cones were created equal. Some were bespoke, crafted for specific people, events, or intentions. Much like how modern perfumers create signature scents, ancient Egyptian artisans likely recorded special recipes. And of course, being Egyptians, they didn't just jot down rose plus resin. Oh no. They had to do it with poetic flair. The scroll beside the boy shows line after line of detailed notation. Which god the scent honors, what hour it should be worn, whether the user had recently been in mourning. Scent wasn't just about personal hygiene. It was a form of identity. You were what you smelled like. One blend was designed only for new mothers. Another was restricted to mourners, layered with bitter herbs and crushed myrrh. There's even mention of a cone for those who have touched the sacred ibis, which, let's face it, sounds like a code for either high-level priesthood or a very specific inside joke. Historians still argue whether these scent records were meant for wide distribution or only as internal guides among the elite. One surviving tablet refers to a royal nose, which may have been an official title like chief perfumer. Can you imagine that on a business card? But here's the quirky part. There's a growing theory that these cones weren't just aromatic accessories. Some believe they were time markers. Like incense clocks in ancient China, which burned at a predictable rate, perfume cones may have functioned as gentle reminders of the passing hours, especially during long temple vigils or rituals that demanded silence. As the cone melted, its scent shifted, signaling different stages of a ceremony. You shift your body slightly and feel the warmth where the cone has melted against your scalp. That's time, evaporating as fragrance. The scribe taps the scroll once, then gestures toward a figure walking into the courtyard. She's older, wrapped in pale linen that practically glows under the moonlight. Her wrists jingle with bronze bangles. She wears no cone, but in her hand she holds a fan made from ostrich feathers, its handle inlaid with lapis. She is a memory keeper. Not a priestess, exactly. Not a noble. Somewhere in between. In Egyptian society, roles could blur at the edges, especially for those involved in rituals. This woman is here to preserve the emotional history of the event, and apparently, she does that through scent. She moves from person to person, wafting the air near their heads, catching hints of their cones, their oils, even the oils seeping from their skin. She leans close to you, fans once, and closes her eyes. "Melted cedar," she says softly, "and almond, and something warm, not fire, body heat." She nods, satisfied, and moves on. The air around her ripples like water. You imagine what it would be like to hold people's stories in your nose instead of your memory. Not words, not pictures, just sense. How strange. How strangely perfect. You remember how your grandmother's kitchen smelled after a thunderstorm, or how your father's closet always carried a whisper of old tobacco and leather. Your brain may forget the shape of their voices, but never the scent. The Egyptians understood that. Their gods were fragrant. Their offerings were scented. Their dead were anointed with resins so thick and sweet they preserved the flesh for millennia. It wasn't just about stopping decay. It was about turning the body into a vessel of memory. In fact, there are tomb paintings showing mourners with perfumed cones melting down their hair as they wail. It's possible these cones were symbolic acts of devotion, the idea being that grief, like scent, cannot be contained. It leaks. It spreads. It lingers long after the ritual is done. You lie back, and suddenly you're there, in one of those tomb paintings. A row of mourners in profile, their eyes black-lined with coal, their hair glistening with melting wax. The scene is still, but you can feel the heat of the desert air, hear the flies buzzing, sense the weight of sorrow in the room. Your own cone tilts slightly as you shift, its soft scent now barely noticeable. But you know it's still working, still whispering into the folds of your mind. The scribe and the memory keeper cross paths and nod. You get the feeling this whole night is being recorded, not just on papyrus, but in the senses. Everyone here will carry these scents home with them. They'll remember this gathering differently because of how it smelled. Someone sneezes quietly in the corner, and a few people chuckle. Even in sacred rituals, the body asserts itself. Maybe that's the point. The memory keeper reaches the far end of the courtyard and raises her fan. The musicians who'd been dozing rouse themselves. A new tune begins, slower now, dreamlike. The kind of music that only plays when a ceremony is winding down. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. You sit up slightly and watch the last of the cones flicker in the low firelight. Some are nearly gone, others still tall and proud, each burning at its own pace, like people, like lifespans. And still, historians debate the exact composition of these cones. Were they all the same base formula, tweaked for effect? Or were they completely unique, mixed and matched depending on the occasion and who was wearing them? The evidence is fragmentary, bits of residue on statues, illustrations on pottery. But the questions remain. What we do know is this. Ancient Egyptians lived through scent as much as through sound or sight. Their world was fragrant, sometimes overwhelmingly so. And for them, smell wasn't optional. It was sacred. You take another breath. Even this far into the night, the air is alive with sweetness, smoke, and something you still can't quite name. It doesn't matter. Some things aren't meant to be named, just felt. The air presses in a little heavier now, softer. Your limbs grow looser, like they're slowly unraveling into the woven mat beneath you. Somewhere nearby, a flute releases a long sigh, and you get the sense that everything around you, the music, the melting cones, the flickering shadows, is conspiring to hush you into something deeper than rest. A small breeze drifts through the courtyard, and with it, a shifting of smells. The perfumed cones are mixing together now. Amber, cinnamon, spikenard, frankincense. It's like someone took a whole temple and ground it into a single breath. You don't need to know which scent is which. Your nose, somehow, already knows. Across from you, another figure has emerged. This one is older still. Not stooped with age, but with a kind of learned stillness. He wears a cone on his head, too, but unlike yours, his is ringed with tiny blue beads, possibly lapis or faience. A marker, maybe. Not of status, but of memory. This man is an archivist, not of scrolls, but of rituals. His job isn't to write anything down. It's to preserve the shape of things by doing them again and again, until his body becomes the record. That dance with the hands? Learned from a priest 2 generations ago. The angle at which he places the cone, passed down from a sister who heard it from her grandmother. You watch as he moves through a simple sequence: sit, stand, turn, bow. Each motion deliberate, almost exaggerated, like the body itself is trying to remember. He pauses beside a small altar. On it lies a tray of unused cones, each wrapped in palm fiber. You recognize some of the scents from earlier, but others are unfamiliar. One smells sharply of vinegar and figs. Another is heavy with musk. One smells like rain. Here's something odd. Rain was considered both a blessing and a disruption in Egypt. Rare enough to be sacred, but dangerous when it came too hard or too fast. There's a fringe theory that cones mimicking the scent of wet earth were burned during droughts, not to please the gods, but to remind them what they'd been withholding. Historians still argue whether this smell summoning was an actual ritual or just poetic embellishment by later scribes. But when you breathe in that damp mineral aroma, you get it. If you had nothing but desert around you, you too might try to make the gods nostalgic for storms. The archivist kneels, selects one of the lesser-known cones, and places it atop the head of a clay statue nearby. The statue is of a woman, arms at her sides, 1 foot slightly forward, the traditional pose. But there's something different about her. She wears no headdress, no amulet. She looks ordinary. You learn that she represents she who speaks softly, a minor spirit, mostly forgotten, who was invoked at bedtime to ward off loud thoughts and restless dreams. Not quite a goddess, not quite a ghost, more like a whisper that lingers behind your eyelids. The archivist lights the cone on her head, and you watch the wax begin to melt. The smell is instantly soothing, powdery, with just a hint of mint and lotus. Your eyes want to close, not from tiredness exactly, but from that soft kind of awe that makes you want to stay very still so the moment doesn't break. You wonder if bedtime rituals in ancient Egypt always smelled like this. Not that everyone had perfumed cones. That was expensive, probably reserved for the wealthy or the very devout, but maybe even ordinary folks had some small version. An oil, a crushed herb, a flower tucked behind the ear. In fact, bits of linen soaked in essential oils have been found tucked into burial wrappings. Some even had little notes tied to them. For a sweet journey, or to keep scorpions away. The ancient version of scented drawer sachets, only more permanent, and slightly more fatal. You shift slightly and notice a new smell creeping in, something spicy and unfamiliar. It comes from a cone being burned near the doorway, and the person wearing it is a traveler. You can tell by the dust on his sandals and the wary way he holds his cup. Not quite an outsider, but not from here either. The cone on his head is made from a rare wood called oud, mixed with desert truffle and dried apricot. It's heady, bold, like someone trying to make an impression. He catches you looking and shrugs. "First time in Waset," he says softly, naming the ancient city now known as Thebes. He grins. "They said I'd stink. I thought I'd come prepared." You laugh quietly and look away, but his scent lingers, weaving into the others like a new instrument added to a very old song. The archivist circles once more and sits again. Around him, the cones burn lower, some reduced to puddles. Yours is nearly gone, too. You can feel a fine slick of oil on your scalp now. Later, you'll rinse it out. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll leave it and carry the scent home with you. That's what the Egyptians did, after all. Perfume wasn't just for the moment. It was a form of portable memory. Kind of like bringing back sand from a beach trip. Only better smelling and less likely to ruin your luggage. Some funerary cones, real terracotta ones, not the perfumed kind, have been found buried with the dead, etched with the names and titles of the deceased. Scholars once thought these were hats or wigs. Now many believe they were simply markers, like a scented gravestone. A reminder of who the person was and what they wanted to be remembered for. You wonder what your cone would say, not in words, but in scent. Would it smell like books? Campfires? That little pastry shop you love but never admit to visiting? Maybe memory doesn't need to be spoken. Maybe it just needs to be inhaled. The music fades a little more, and the archivist bows his head. You follow suit. All around you, scent swirls, sweet, bitter, sacred, strange. And somewhere in that cloud you fall just a little deeper into the night. The ground beneath you feels more like silk than sand now. Your senses blurred in that halfway place between wakefulness and dream. The perfume from your cone has almost fully melted, a slow ribbon of wax having trickled down the back of your neck, cooling as it travels. You don't mind. It feels like the day surrendering inch by inch into the arms of evening. There's a new sound, low and rhythmic, a stone being ground against another. You tilt your head slightly and see her. A young girl, barely a teenager, crouched by a basalt slab. She's grinding something in a small, shallow bowl with the kind of focus you usually reserve for making coffee while still half asleep. Only, she's grinding petals. Fresh petals. Rose, blue lotus, marjoram. You didn't even see where she got them. They seem impossibly vivid against the dusty stone, as though reality has briefly cranked up its saturation settings. She crushes, mixes, adds a drizzle of oil from a small jar beside her. The result is a paste, a soft, glistening mush of flowers and fragrance. This, you realize, is the base of a new perfume cone. She's learning the craft, probably the daughter or niece of a temple perfumer. You watch as she pinches off a bit of the paste and shapes it carefully into a cone, turning it gently with fingers more used to embroidery than alchemy. Fringe scholars, bless their dust-covered boots, once theorized that girls like her were trained in elite scent schools, attached to temples, akin to Hogwarts but for noses. Mainstream historians generally dismiss this as romantic fiction, though some half-deciphered temple wall fragments hint at formal training for scent makers. The truth, like many things in Egypt, is murky and scented with mystery. She places her fresh cone onto a sun-warmed tile to dry. It will take days to cure fully, but the initial shape already holds. The cone is delicate, symmetrical, a quiet act of devotion. You sense pride, not arrogance, but the kind that makes your back a little straighter when no one's looking. You remember what the archivist did earlier, placing a cone atop the statue of She Who Speaks Softly, and wonder if that ritual started right here with someone like her. A young girl, shaping scent into memory, building altars from scent and silence. There's something inherently hopeful about this, isn't there? The idea that smells, ephemeral, slippery things, could be molded, stored, repeated. In a world where even kings could be forgotten, a cone of perfume might outlive a poem. Nearby, a small boy is carrying a basket of spent cones, used up, melted flat, their wax smeared like punctuation across the stone floors. He's humming to himself, not quite in tune, but charmingly committed. You catch a few words of the song, something about flowers, lovers, and bees that fall asleep mid-flight. The basket he carries smells incredible, like a graveyard for dreams. Each melted cone leaves behind its own ghost, spicy clove, cool mint, sticky myrrh. The smells don't fight each other. They harmonize, like friends who've stopped trying to impress and now just enjoy sitting quietly together. As he dumps the wax remnants into a clay pit for later reuse, yes, even fragrance had a recycling plan, you think again about how little went to waste. Egyptians were thrifty, not in a miserly way, but in a reverent one. If something smelled good once, it could smell good again. Some texts even suggest that the remnants of burnt cones were mixed into incense or used to anoint statues, a kind of spiritual composting. Your used perfume wasn't just waste, it was legacy. A breeze stirs again, carrying a dry heat that smells faintly of roasted barley and warm honey. Somewhere someone is preparing bread. That too was often infused with scent. Bread in the morning, bread for the gods. Bread with lavender and cumin, baked in clay domes that look suspiciously like little perfume cones themselves. Okay, maybe that's just your sleepy brain making connections. But still, it fits. The girl finishes shaping her batch and begins to clean the grinding bowl. She's thorough, scraping up every last sticky trace with a sliver of palm husk. Nothing wasted. Not a drop of rose water. Not a flicker of effort. You're starting to understand how deeply scent shaped the rhythm of life here. Not just in ceremonies or romantic trysts, but in chores, in school, in grief. There were cones for births, cones for weddings, cones for the first day of harvest, and, of course, cones for the dead. Some cones, historians believe, were never meant to be burned at all. Decorative only, carved from alabaster or limestone and painted to mimic their aromatic cousins. Placed in tombs or altars like eternal decoys, pretending to perfume eternity. It's a little sad, maybe, but also clever. Eternity is expensive. Sometimes, a beautiful lie is the best scent money can't buy. Historians still argue whether those stone cones were symbolic stand-ins for real rituals or just artistic flourishes. One tomb painting even shows a ghost reaching toward a perfumed cone, but never quite touching it. Symbolic longing? Or just bad perspective drawing? Egyptologists can't agree. But here's the thing. None of it needs to be exact. You don't need to know the precise blend or ceremonial timing. The magic wasn't in the ritual. It was in the doing. The act of pressing flowers into wax. The slow burn of oil, the way your own body heat turned a cone into a living scent cloud. You glance up. The stars are visible now, and the courtyard is mostly dark, lit only by flickering oil lamps. The cones still burning cast long, spindly shadows. Yours has finished. The oil has soaked in, and what's left is a faint shimmer along your scalp, like a soft halo only you can feel. There's a final gift. The girl, having noticed your attention, tiptoes over and places a small cone beside you. It's unfinished, still soft, still fragrant, still glowing with the heat of her hands. A gift not of perfection, but of process. You cradle it gently in your palm. It smells like orange blossom and something else. Maybe fig, maybe jasmine. You can't quite place it. But it smells honest, like someone trying their best. You smile, almost asleep now. This is how ancient Egyptians stayed fresh, sure, but maybe it's also how they stayed human. You shift ever so slightly on the worn stone bench, and the warmth of the cone the girl gave you lingers in your hand like a whisper that hasn't quite finished speaking. There's still movement around you, slower now, more subdued, but a man across the courtyard catches your eye. He's older, with laugh lines carved deep around his mouth and a shiny spot on his scalp where the sun has done its best work. He's holding something that looks like a scroll and a paintbrush, but he's not writing. He's sniffing. Not dramatically. Not with the exaggerated flair of a wine sommelier trying to impress a date. No, this is almost reverent. Nose just above the paper, brush dipped in something amber-colored, he dabs it once, then twice, onto the surface. You lean forward slightly and catch a whiff. It smells like cinnamon and Nile mud, and something oddly metallic, like the inside of an old coin purse. He's not writing a poem, he's painting scent. You didn't expect that one, did you? See, perfumed cones weren't the only olfactory art form the Egyptians dabbled in. They also scented papyrus scrolls. Not all of them, just special ones. Letters to loved ones, ritual invocations, or, as some fringe scholars propose, with suspicious enthusiasm, erotic fan fiction involving gods and sacred animals. Historians mostly roll their eyes at that last one, though a few are quietly intrigued. Either way, this man is creating something known as a scent script. A written message laced with aroma. You read with your eyes, yes, but also your nose, as if the words should feel familiar, not just in your brain, but in your body. You imagine receiving a love letter that smells faintly of lilies, or a farewell note from a priest with undertones of incense and cedar, as if the temple itself breathed a blessing onto the page. The technique? It varied. Some used perfumed ink, oil-infused soot and resins. Others applied a scent layer post-writing, like adding perfume to parchment. The trick was in preserving the smell without staining the symbols. Ancient Egyptian paper wasn't exactly waterproof after all. That man across the way. He taps his brush again. You hear the faint tch of bristle meeting surface. Then he pauses, holds the paper close, and smiles like he's just read a secret meant only for him. You think about how scent preserves memory, how a whiff of something long forgotten can punch a hole in time. Maybe the Egyptians knew this better than we do. Maybe that's why they laced their scrolls with perfume, so that their words wouldn't just echo, they'd haunt. A servant walks by with a platter of folded linen napkins. Odd, you think, until she hands one to the man. He dabs it across his face, then waves it lightly through the air. The cloth is scented too. Turns out, fabric wasn't left out of the perfumed parade. Egyptians soaked linens in essential oils or flower distillations, letting them dry slowly in shaded courtyards like this one. Some garments were even sold pre-scented, labeled with poetic names like Kiss of the Lotus or Morning Under Myrrh. Historians still argue whether this practice was purely aesthetic or had ritual significance. Some tombs contain linen strips that smell faintly floral, even millennia later. Coincidence? Hard to say, but it gives a whole new meaning to airing out your laundry. And then, there's the fan. A woman nearby, elegant in that unbothered queen kind of way, is fanning herself with a contraption made of palm fronds and gold thread. It's not just for show. Attached to the fan is a small cloth pouch, and you realize it's a scent sachet. As she waves it gently, the breeze carries hints of lavender and something bitter. Maybe myrrh, maybe crushed sage. It's subtle, but it's there, and you suddenly wish modern fans came with aromatherapy attachments. Dyson, take notes. This woman, she sees you noticing. And for a second, just a flicker, she raises an eyebrow like you're in on the secret, like you've passed some unspoken test. You feel initiated. Nearby, a cluster of young men argue over something in low, excited voices. You catch the words oil, competition, and Queen's Feast. Apparently, they're planning a scent showdown. Not uncommon in high society, fragrance contests were real. Participants would craft unique cones or oils and present them to a panel of nobles or priestesses. Winners might earn favor, coin, even positions in elite households. Losers, well, probably just ended up smelling good and going home with wounded pride. Some records suggest that Cleopatra herself held such contests in her court. And yes, we all know the Cleopatra stories are about 40% truth, 60% fan fiction at this point. But still, she was known for layering perfumes, using scent to enter a room before her body did. She'd sail in on ships with scented sails, for crying out loud. Talk about making an entrance. You tilt your head back. The night has deepened, and the stars look like someone sprinkled salt across a navy blue sheet. Somewhere in the distance, a harp starts playing. Soft, almost tentative. The sound tugs at something behind your ribs. That's when it hits you. All of this, the scrolls, the linen, the fan, the cones, isn't just about smelling nice. It's about marking time, carving memories into scent, making sure that when someone thinks of you, they remember how the air changed when you entered. You inhale again. The cone in your hand has cooled. The smell has faded slightly, but it's still there. just enough to anchor you, to whisper, "You were here. You felt this." And suddenly, you wonder what you'd smell like if someone sculpted you into a cone. What memories would you burn down to wax? You lean back, the stone warm beneath you now, having absorbed the lingering heat of the day. There's a softness to the air, a kind of velvety quiet that only comes after everyone's finally tired of trying to impress each other. Even the scents seem to rest. They're not leaping out at you anymore, not demanding attention, just settling into the night like old cats curling around your ankles. A breeze picks up, bringing with it something different. Not floral, not oily, something smoky. You follow it. Your feet know the way before your mind catches up. Past the linens, past the sleeping servants, into a darker corner of the estate where the air smells like burnt honey and crushed bark. And there it is, the perfume fire. Not a fire for warmth. No, this one's carefully tended, flickering low in a copper brazier. Around it, small clay bowls are arranged in a circle, each holding a different blend of aromatic resins. You count them: frankincense, myrrh, labdanum, cedar shavings, and one bowl that smells strongly of... Wait, is that cinnamon and goat fat? Oh, yeah. Ancient Egypt didn't always go for elegance. Sometimes they leaned hard into weird. See, burning scent wasn't just for rituals or masking bad smells. It was a form of therapy. For the body, the spirit, and, as some records claim, even the dreams. Egyptians believed that certain scents, when burned, could guide your dreams or protect your soul during sleep. Not a bad bedtime trick, really. You watch as a priest, or maybe just a very enthusiastic servant, adds a pinch of resin to the fire. A plume of smoke curls upward, and you swear it forms a shape. A bird, a woman. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe you're finally slipping into that dreamy brain soup where everything starts to shimmer at the edges. But here's the kicker. Ancient physicians actually prescribed scented smoke. Literally, smoke therapy. Got a sore throat? Try inhaling burnt juniper. Anxious thoughts? Sit near a fire of sweet flag root. Unruly dreams? There's a special mixture of blue lotus, henna bark, and, this is real, powdered lizard tail. Historians still argue whether these treatments had actual physical effects or if they just made patients feel special and soothed. Either way, the smoke lingers. The man tending the fire, let's call him Nizu, leans over the flames, eyes half-lidded. He's humming something. It's not a song you recognize, but it feels familiar in the bones. A rhythm older than language. He looks up and notices you. Nods once, then gestures toward a smaller bowl. "For sleep," he murmurs. You approach, and the scent hits you gently, like velvet soaked in spiced wine. There's lavender, clearly, but also some sort of tree sap and just the tiniest flicker of citrus. Your brain flutters, then sighs. He passes you a thin linen cloth. "For your head," he says. You watch as he dips it into the smoke. Not close enough to burn, just enough to catch the scent. Then he folds it neatly and hands it to you like a gift. And yes, you take it. Of course you do. You press the cloth to your face, and the world blurs. Not just visually, but emotionally. It feels like being gently erased. Your stress, your urgency, the buzz behind your eyes, all of it slipping away, scent by scent. This, you think, is what bedtime looked like for an elite Egyptian. Not Netflix, not melatonin gummies, just smoke, herbs, and cloth. Some texts mention that before important dreams, visions they hoped would bring divine messages, people would fast, then burn specific blends of incense while lying on consecrated mats. Blue lotus was popular, thanks to its mildly psychoactive effects. But other herbs were used to invite visits from ancestors or even gods. One fringe theory even suggests that priests kept dream chambers, Small, windowless rooms lined with perfumed oil pots and braziers, where you could pay to be guided into divine dreams. Honestly, it sounds like the world's earliest spa-meets hallucination chamber. You wonder what it would be like to sleep there, surrounded by all those scents, the smoke painting stories on the back of your eyelids. The fire crackles again, louder this time, and Nesu adds a final pinch of something sweet, maybe dried fig. The smoke blooms upward, golden and slow, like a dancer who's forgotten the world is watching. He says, "They called this the breath of the gods." You believe it. Because the thing about scent, especially when it's warmed, released, and set free, is that it doesn't just stay in your nose. It weaves into your mind. It digs tiny anchors into memory. And later, weeks or even years from now, a whiff of something vaguely similar will knock you sideways. You won't know why you suddenly feel calm, or soft, or like you're standing in a temple courtyard wrapped in night air. But it'll be this, right here, this fire, this scent, this very moment. Nearby, a small clay jar rattles. Nesu pulls it open and shows you its contents: crushed petals, cinnamon bark, and something sticky, probably honey. "We put this on the dogs," he says, as if that needs no further explanation. And actually, it kind of doesn't. Egyptian pets, especially dogs and monkeys, were often perfumed too. The rich didn't just want to smell good. They wanted everything they loved to smell like a goddess's embrace. Some tomb paintings even depict favorite pets being lovingly oiled and wrapped in floral garlands. One famously pampered monkey was allegedly buried with a cone on its head. Whether that's a sign of reverence or just ancient trolling, we'll never know. Historians still debate whether these animal rituals were purely symbolic or carried spiritual weight. Was it about luxury? Or was scent a bridge between souls, human and beast? Either way, you're starting to realize that in Egypt, scent wasn't accessory. It was architecture. It built moments, defined spaces, drew invisible lines between the sacred and the mundane. And here, by the perfume fire, with your linen cloth still warm in your hand, you feel like you've crossed that line. Just a little. You look up. The stars haven't moved, but you have. Somehow you're deeper in this world than you expected. And it smells like peace. The cloth still cradles your cheek as the fire dwindles into a soft, pulsing glow. You can almost hear it exhale, like it too is settling into sleep. But you're not done yet. Because while the cone on your head and the scent in your nostrils have been delightful distractions, the Egyptians were just getting started. They had one final secret, one that would outlast empires and be dug up millennia later, still fragrant. You walk a little farther, down corridors slick with torchlight. The air grows cooler, more silent. You pass what might once have been a garden, now dry and skeletal, and finally enter a stone chamber where the temperature drops so quickly it makes you shiver. Here, in a room lined with alabaster jars, lies the true magic, the perfume itself, the one not worn daily, not heated or burned, but sealed. It's called kai-fi, or if you're feeling bold, kapet, as it was known in ancient Egyptian tongue, a sacred perfume. Part medicine, part ritual incense, part divine offering, and absolutely legendary for its scent. Even the Greeks and Romans got wind of it, metaphorically and literally, and tried to make their own versions. But the original? That was Egyptian through and through. You crouch next to one of the jars. Its lid is coated in resin, long hardened like caramelized sap. The air around it smells faintly of old raisins and pine. You don't even need to open it. The scent has found tiny cracks and escaped over centuries. That's how powerful this stuff was. The original recipes for kai-fi are complex, some calling for as many as 16 ingredients, each prepared in a specific order, over multiple days, with periods of rest and prayer in between. Not your average DIY project. We're talking honey, wine, raisins, frankincense, cinnamon, mastic resin, juniper berries, myrrh, and a variety of herbs that translators still argue over. Was that sweet flag or calamus? Cassia or cardamom? Historians still can't quite agree, but they all agree on one thing. Kai-Fi wasn't just meant to smell good, it was meant to do something. You were supposed to feel it in your bones. Some texts say it soothed anxiety, helped you breathe deeper, even induced trance states. A few ancient sources describe priests using Kai-Fi to walk with the gods in dreams. One medical papyrus flat out says Kai-Fi can heal the liver and purify the lungs, which is a bold claim for what is, essentially, very fancy potpourri. You trail your finger along the edge of the jar, then sit beside it, cross-legged on the cool stone floor. The walls here are carved with tiny figures, barely visible unless you squint. You recognize Anubis, jackal-headed, watching over a human figure wrapped in linen. Death, but calm. Not sinister, almost serene. And suddenly, it hits you. This scent, Kai-Fi, wasn't just used in temples. It was used for death. More specifically, for preparing the dead. When you died in ancient Egypt, your body went on a journey nearly as long as your spirit. Oils were massaged into your skin, resins poured into your skull, and scents, so many scents, surrounded your body like a protective fog. Kai-Fi was one of them. Burned during mummification rituals, mixed into embalming oils, or simply set around the tomb so your journey into the afterlife smelled like heaven. Imagine that. Dying and having your soul ushered into eternity on a bed of baked wine and cedar smoke. One fringe theory even suggests that the placement of certain Kai-Fi ingredients in jars around tombs wasn't just symbolic, it was pharmacological, a kind of ancient time-release scent therapy, ensuring that the body decomposed in a sacred cloud of antibacterial perfume. Scientists studying residue from certain tomb jars claim that the compounds might have helped slow bacterial growth. Were the Egyptians ancient chemists in linen skirts? Maybe. Or maybe they were just very committed to going out smelling amazing. Either way, the result is impressive. You notice a small dish beside the jar, a kind of shallow bowl with dried residue stuck in lazy rings around the inside. This was probably used to warm the Kai-Fi slowly, gently, over coals, just enough to release its scent without burning it. One account from a Greek traveler describes how the scent of Kai-Fi would fill the house with joy for hours after being burned. And here you are, surrounded by that ghost of a smell thousands of years later. You breathe it in, the sweetness, the woodiness, that hint of fermented fruit. It doesn't smell like any perfume you've ever known. It smells like story. And for a moment, the chamber becomes something else. Not a tomb, not a lab, but a memory. A place frozen in time where a priest once stood over a flickering bowl of scent and whispered prayers for a soul's safe passage. You close your eyes. The scent presses gently against your brain, and your thoughts slow. It's not sleep yet, but the path toward it is clearing. Like someone has swept the sand from the road, lit a few torches, and said, "This way." You reach for the cloth again. It still smells faintly of lavender and warm herbs, but now there's something deeper layered underneath, something that wasn't there before. You realize that scent is like memory that doesn't need language. You think of the cones melting in the hot sun, of monkeys in floral garlands, of the dream smoke and its promises, and now of the Kai-Fi, this ancient, sweet elixir of death and peace. And you smile, just a little, at how much effort these people went through just to smell good. Or maybe not just that. Maybe they knew something we forget. That scent is a kind of magic. It bypasses logic, slips through the cracks of the brain, and whispers directly to your spirit. It tells you, you're safe now. You're here. You exist. And maybe, just maybe, it tells the gods the same thing. You stay seated on the cool floor longer than expected. Time in this tomb-like space seems to stretch, like molasses or honey in winter, and you're in no hurry to disturb it. The scent of Kai-Fi lingers, a presence all its own, less like a perfume now, more like a personality. Wise, watchful, maybe even a little smug, knowing it survived thousands of years while the people who made it have long since turned to dust. And yet, their story isn't gone. You've been wearing it on your head. You rise slowly, stretching your limbs. Somewhere behind you, the shadows shift, not menacingly, just reminding you that this space was once alive with ritual, movement, sacred noise. You follow a corridor lined with jars, some sealed, some broken. Dried remnants crunch underfoot. Probably spices, maybe old resins. There's a distinct licorice smell now. Could be fennel, or anise, or something else entirely, depending on how the ingredients aged, oxidized, or just partied with the desert air over millennia. What's clear is this: the Egyptians didn't view fragrance as frivolous. To them, scent wasn't a last-minute spritz before leaving the house. It was essential, foundational, spiritual hygiene, physical protection, a social signal, and most fascinating of all, a portal. Yes, a literal portal. You remember the temples, the scrolls, the ancient murals where scent rises like mist from a burner and reaches out, upward, spiraling, toward a god with the head of a falcon or lion. That smoky trail? That's how humans made themselves known. Smell was a prayer you didn't have to say out loud. You can't help but think of your own life now. Maybe how you spritz a little cologne before a date, light a candle after a bad day, open a shampoo bottle just to smell something comforting when everything else feels like chaos. The ancient Egyptians? Same idea, just way, way more elaborate. And they didn't just reserve these scents for themselves. Oh no. In fact, there was an entire fragrance economy. Imagine the chaos of an open-air perfume market under the Cairo sun, circa 1400 BCE. Merchants shouting over each other in the middle of a spice haze, dried flower petals crunching under your sandals. You'd haggle over myrrh like it was gold, and honestly, back then, it sort of was. Perfumes were currency, diplomacy, even weaponized seduction. Some temples were so rich in fragrance materials, they were referred to as perfume banks, stocked with oils, incense, and rare ingredients from across the ancient world. The Temple of Edfu? Basically a 5-star spa for gods. And if you thought the perfume cones were fancy, wait until you hear this. There were perfumes named after gods themselves, specially blended for temple ceremonies and stored in personalized jars. You reach one of those jars now, tall, with a narrow neck and inscriptions wrapped around it like a scroll. The hieroglyphs are faded, but you can make out a familiar symbol, the Ankh. Life. This jar wasn't made to be practical. It's ceremonial. And inside, if you could crack it open, might be the last trace of a fragrance that no living nose has smelled in centuries. The ancient perfume is likely dry now, or fused to the bottom like tar, but even that fossilized scrap could hold hints. Of balsam, maybe, or labdanum. That sticky resin scraped from shrubs collected from goat beards, no less. Yes, you heard that right. Perfume collected from the hair of goats. Ancient glam had a price. You trace your finger over the ankh and think about how scent, more than words, ties us to time. Most people remember smells longer than sounds, longer than faces. It's called the Proust effect, named after a French guy who ate a cookie and suddenly remembered his entire childhood. But the Egyptians didn't need a name for it. They just knew. Knew that scent sticks. Knew that one whiff of cinnamon or blue lotus could take you right back to the heart of something sacred. And speaking of blue lotus, yes, we've come full circle again. It wasn't just dipped in wine or tucked behind the ear. It was also distilled into oil, applied as a kind of euphoria balm. One record suggests that high-ranking women would dab it on their wrists and temples before ceremonial intimacy. That's a polite way of saying mood lighting, but with plants. And some historians still argue whether the Blue Lotus truly had psychoactive properties, or whether it was all suggestion and soft lighting. But hey, if it works, it works. You walk on, and somewhere you pass a bundle of reeds tied with twine. Crushed herbs still cling to it. A rudimentary incense wand, a massage tool, or just garbage from a forgotten ritual? Hard to say. But it smells faintly of mint and crushed coriander. The air feels alive with traces of intention. And this is the paradox, isn't it? The people who made these smells, who dipped their cones and stirred their kai-fi, they've been gone for thousands of years. And yet, in a weird way, they're here. Every time you sniff something sweet or spicy or smoky and it stirs your heart without your permission, some ancient perfumer is whispering across time. They had no idea their recipes would survive this long. Or maybe they did. Maybe that was the point. Maybe they knew a day would come when someone, somewhere, would stand in a ruined tomb, inhale something they couldn't name, and feel, just for a second, connected. You lean against the wall. The coolness seeps into your shoulder. You close your eyes and imagine yourself not in this dusty ruin, but in a royal chamber, warm and drowsy, the cone on your head slowly dissolving, the gods leaning closer to sniff the prayers rising from your skin. Your breath slows, and this time, you're not surprised when the scent returns, not from the jar or the cloth, but from inside you, like the memory of a dream you didn't know you had. You smile, because maybe this whole time you weren't just learning about perfume. Maybe you were wearing it too. You settle deeper into the stillness now, the kind that wraps around you like a cotton sheet pulled straight from the sun. Not much is left to explore, at least not physically. You've wandered through storerooms and sanctuaries, past broken altars and waxy resin spills, through the echoes of markets and private chambers. Your body might still be resting in this ancient place, but your mind is drifting. It drifts backward, to the first time you noticed scent as something more than clean laundry or a passing car's cologne trail. Maybe you were young. Maybe it was a grandmother's rice powder or the tang of cloves on someone's breath. Something so simple but unforgettable. That was your gateway. That was your first perfume cone in its own way. And you get it now. You understand why these ancient people went to such lengths, not just to smell good, but to layer their lives with memory, to turn invisible things into identity, into legacy. Because let's be real, their world wasn't all incense and lotus flowers. It was harsh, blistering heat, dust in your throat, constant reminders that life was fragile, temporary, sometimes brutal, plague, war, crocodiles. And yet, they insisted on surrounding themselves with sweetness. That's not vanity. That's resistance. You imagine yourself walking through Thebes in its prime. People move past you in linen robes, their shaved heads gleaming, their perfume cones perched like little melting hats. They nod to you with coal-lined eyes, not because you're special, but because you smell right. You belong. You've been initiated into the old club of those who know the difference between myrrh and frankincense, between ritual and routine. And as you pass a spice vendor, he waves a small pouch under your nose, just enough for a hit of cardamom. You nod in approval. He grins. It's not a transaction. It's a conversation, a tiny, scented handshake. The cone on your head starts to slide, the wax softening under the Egyptian sun. A drop hits your shoulder, fragrant and warm. You don't brush it away. You let it soak in. And maybe that's what the cone was all along. Not just a fragrance dispenser, but a reminder. A weight on the head to keep you grounded, to make you feel your body as a sacred object. You weren't just a person in Egypt. You were a vessel, a temple. Your sweat was perfumed, your breath ceremonial. Historians still argue whether the cones were worn daily or only for elite rituals, but you're beginning to suspect it didn't matter. What mattered was the intention. The scent said, "I'm alive, I'm present, I'm part of this story." And what a story it is. Because long before the French bottled eau de toilette, before Chanel made No. 5, before celebrity-endorsed body sprays, there were cones, made by hand, applied with reverence, designed to melt and mark a moment. You reach for one final item, a small bronze spoon, carved like a lotus petal. It's resting on a slab of stone, beside a cracked oil jar. Someone used it to measure out beauty. You lift it carefully. It still smells faintly of something floral and fermented, like jasmine left in wine. You don't know who held it last. Maybe it was a priestess, maybe a servant, maybe someone like you. Curious, half skeptical, a little enchanted. You set the spoon down, and then you sit again, on the floor, cross-legged, elbows on knees, breathing slow. You didn't expect a story about melted wax and ancient perfume to feel like a meditation, but here we are. You came for history, and you got a tiny ritual of your own. And just when you think that's it, just when you're ready to let go, to dissolve into sleep, you feel it again. The soft tickle behind your ear, the last whisper of blue lotus, a single note still hanging in the air, stubborn as memory. It's time. Your journey is closing. But the cone stays with you. Always. So now, you let yourself drift. There's nothing left to do. No more temples to explore, no markets to haggle in, no scrolls to decipher. Only the soft glow behind your eyelids and the quiet presence of a world long gone, still breathing gently beside you. Let the sense of Egypt fade like twilight behind desert hills. Slowly, slowly. Imagine the sky over Thebes, turning from gold to violet to the deepest indigo, stars just beginning to hum their silent songs. Feel the cone on your head one last time. Its warmth, its slow melt, the soft pulse of something sacred dissolving into you. You are safe. You are still. And you are not alone. The ancients are here, somewhere between spice and shadow. Their hands touched the same oils. Their dreams smelled the same. Their breath, their sweat, their sorrows. They scented them all, turned even pain into perfume. Let the silence grow wide around you now, like the Nile at night. No movement, no thought. Just being. Breathe in, breathe out. Float. And if you dream, may it be rich. May it smell of cardamom and honey, of kai-fi smoke and temple stone, of something ancient and kind that lives just under your skin. You've been perfumed by history, and now you can sleep. Sweet dreams.